They say that real estate prices in Canada always go up. But is that really true? We'll find out in today's video, so let's get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Navjot and I'm on a mission to retire 1 million immigrants with $5 million. And if you want to be part of that mission, all you need to do is subscribe to this particular channel, and I promise you that I'll give you a ton of value on this very channel. On to today's topic of analyzing the last 50 years of real estate, and then we'll talk about the trends and the big picture from 1975 to 2024. I have one slide and it's a very action-packed. I'm very proud of that slide, so I'll talk about that slide there. After we talk about the big picture, I'll talk about the problem with this big picture and we'll just discuss that. And finally, we'll talk about should you buy in 2024 and 2025. Now, before I start with my first slide, which I told you I'm proud of, I want to let you know that there is a free first-time homebuyer webinar which is happening on Wednesday. So this video is coming on Sunday. The coming Wednesday in 3 days, there is a free first-time homebuyer webinar. The link to that is in the description. It's 100% free and it's specially made for people who are buying their first homes. Now let's look at the trend from 1975 all the way to today. And this is the real estate prices. These are GTA prices. So this is the real estate price that we had. It's ridiculous to think that you could actually buy an average home in GTA for just $57,000 back in 1975, and the same home, the average price of GTA is over $1.1 million today. But you'll see that long term, the prices have gone up. Now, if I look at a 10-year return, and that's the problem with a lot of people who say that real estate prices always go up, they forget to tell that it always goes up, but in long term. And when I say long term, we need to look at a 10-year horizon. So let's look at the 10-year horizon of real estate prices. So from 1975 to 1985, real estate prices grew by 6.6% in GTA. From 1985 to 1995, including this massive slump, and I'll talk about this. This was a recession of early 1990s, and we'll talk about this as well in this particular slide. But even then, the 10-year horizon was plus 6.4%. If you talk about 1995 to 2005, again, you'll see an increase of 5.2%. This was probably the lowest increase that we have seen in any 10-year duration. Then if you look at 2005 to 2015, we'll again see a 6% increase. And then if we see from 2015 to 2024, which I think was the peak of immigration as well, despite the decline that we have seen in the last 2 years in real estate, we still see a 7% growth in real estate across these 10 years. So it's safe to assume that at any given 10-year intervals, the real estate prices in Canada grow by over 6%, at the very least 5%. Now, these are just simple numbers, and I've taken last 50 years so that there is unassailable proof that the real estate prices always goes up long term. However, in the short run, there could be some negative years. If you look at the negative returns, the 1-year intervals, so if I look at the 1-year growth for every year, so 1976 versus 1975, 1977 versus 1976, the 1-year intervals, these are 40 intervals that we have looked at. Out of the 50 years that we looked at, 9 years were such where we had negative return, which means that the real estate prices today were actually lower than the real estate prices 1 year from today. If you look at the 5-year interval, there were only 4 of these instances. And if you look at the 10-year interval, there were only 2 of these instances. And these 10-year intervals were mostly in the 1990s, where there was a massive recession. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Talking about that recession, if you look at 1989, what happened in 1989 was the real estate prices actually peaked a lot. In fact, if you look at from 1985 to 1989, the real estate prices have almost tripled in value, 2.5x in just 5 years. There was an unprecedented growth in real estate. There was kind of a bubble being created, and that bubble burst when the recession happened. And we'll talk about the interest rates at that time in a bit, but that was the peak of the market, $273,000. But honestly, if people bought at $273,000, I don't think they'll be extremely sad today, 30 years from then, because that home, even though it looked that they bought at the peak, is actually worth a lot more today. Now let's look at what happened in 1989 to 1992, the recession that we had in the early 90s. Now this recession was triggered by globalization, where Canada was very slow to respond to how the world was changing. So that was one, and that led to unemployment in 1992, and it peaked at 12%. So when people say that can we have the same amount of decline that we had in early 1990s, which was 1989 to 1992, today, I would be very surprised if we do that, because right now the unemployment rate is at 5-6% maximum, and at that time the unemployment rate peaked at about 12%. Even in 1989 the unemployment rate was almost at 7%, which is higher than today. The other problem was that the prime rate was 14% in 1990, 14%, and that led to such a reduced demand in housing. Despite the housing prices being very low, 14% is just way too high for people to qualify, and therefore people were not qualifying, people were defaulting, and all that led to the recession of early 1990s. And honestly, these people actually took 12 years to recover on the purchase prices. So if someone bought a home in 1989 at $273,000, you'll see that only in 2001 and 2002 we again reached those prices. Now, can we have a repeat of 1990s? Sure, no one knows what will happen in the next 2 years. However, the biggest indicator of a massive recession is unemployment, and even though unemployment numbers have been increasing, they are not increasing at the pace to just have a repeat of 1990s. I don't think we are at a place where we can say that we'll have a repeat of 1990s, but again, we never know. However, if you look at a long-term interval, people who bought at $273,000 in 1989, 35 years down the line, they'll still be happy because their home prices still grew at 4% year on year. And if you look at the home prices since 1985, which is 40-year interval, the home prices grew by about 6% year on year. That's the reason why in all my calculations that you've seen in rent versus buy, all the calculations that I do on retirement, I always take a 4% return year on year on real estate. And the reason is exactly this, because even if you bought at the peak of the market 30 years down the line, you'll still have real estate growing at 4% year on year, which is the worst case scenario. And even though it seems like I take a massive risk when it comes to real estate and investing, I'm a very, very risk averse investor, and I always look at very pessimist numbers. And this is where I get all my numbers from. 4% is the worst case scenario that has happened across the last 30 years, 35 years, and I've looked at data from the last 50 years. All this to say that if you have a 5+ year of horizon on buying a home, especially your primary home, you'll be okay, because long-term real estate does go up, and we saw that in the previous slide. Now let's assume that you are buying a home right now, and I'll actually prove that with numbers. Let's say assume that you are buying a home right now for $800,000 at 10% down payment. Your mortgage expenses, which includes the property tax, utility bill, and everything, is about $4,500. Home value, which you bought at $800,000, is obviously worth the same amount that you bought at $800,000. The outstanding mortgage on this one will be about $742,000, because you are also paying the mortgage insurance. That's why it's not a straight up 90% of this. And then the home equity that you have is a simple calculation of 800 minus 742, which is $57,000. Now, 5 years from now, the mortgage expenses will not increase a lot. In fact, it will ideally go down, because your mortgage, the mortgage interest rate will ideally go down. But let's assume that the mortgage payment remains the same at the same interest rate. I've actually done all the calculations at 4% interest rate. It's lower than what you get right now, but I've just done an average calculation because I'm doing a long-term calculation. But obviously the property tax will increase, and all that inflation will come into play, and your mortgage payment would be just shy of $4,600. Let's assume that's the case. This is monthly payments, by the way. The home value would have increased at 4% year on year, which is the worst case scenario that we saw in the last slide, unless we don't believe in the 50-year, trends, which I would want to believe in. The home value worst case will be $935,000. The outstanding balance, because you are paying your mortgage down every single month for the next 5 years, it will be about $644,000, and the equity would increase to about $291,000. In 10 years, your mortgage expenses will increase a little bit. And remember, if you are renting, the rent will actually go up 2.5 to 3% every single year. But that's not how the mortgage payment would work, because the mortgage payment would actually remain the same as long as you have the same interest rate. The home value would have increased again 4% year on year. The outstanding balance would have paid down again to $524,000, and you will have a home equity of $600,000, and that's a lot of equity to have in your home. So in 25 years, the beauty of this is that you'll not have a mortgage payment, and this is close to when you are getting to retirement, and you would not want a lot of your personal expenses there, because you don't have any active income now, or in 5 years you'll not have any active income. Therefore, the only expenses that you have is not of mortgage, but of property tax and other expenses that you have in a household, like maintenance. The home value would have increased to about $2 million. There will be no outstanding balance on your property, and therefore it means that you have a fair and clear $2 million property if you buy a property for $800,000 today. And that's the reason why I say that if you do the numbers for long term, you will never go wrong. Even if you include the realtor fee, if you sell this home at $2 million, even then you would have made a shitload of money, because that's how real estate prices work. They always go up long term, but the problem is most people don't have the patience to stay in the market long term. However, I will tell you the problem that we have with all these long-term trends. So now I know that I said that I do believe in the worst case scenario of 4%, but the reason why I take a worst case scenario is also because of this particular factor, which is the average household income has actually not increased at the same pace as the home value. Let's look at 1975 versus 2024, and the median household income was $19,000 in 1975, and it has increased by almost 5x to close to $100,000. This is household income, gross, before taxes. Now, on a $19,000 salary in 1975, you could easily afford a $57,000 home, because that was the average price of a home in GTA at that time. However, the home prices have increased by almost 20x, 19x to be exact, from 1975 to 2024, but the incomes have only increased by 5x. That's the main problem with Canadian real estate. The incomes have not increased at the same pace as the home values. And that's the exact reason why I don't take a 6% year-on-year return for the next 30 years. I only take the worst case scenario of 4%. But the thing to understand here is that not everyone is buying and not everyone can qualify for a home. So that's the problem that I have with averages. So let's move away from average on this particular slide. So total number of homes sold in GTA in 2023 was 66,000 homes, just under 66,000. I thought this number is very low, but that's the number that is listed on Treb. This is only GTA, by the way. 20,000 were bought by first-time home buyers. So 30% of this number is first-time home buyers. Now let's look at the total number of households in GTA. There are about 2 million households. Obviously, there are more people that live in GTA, but the number of households that we have is 2 million. The top 10% is about 200,000, obviously 10% of 2 million, and top 5% is 5% of 2 million, which is 100,000. I'll tell you the relevance of this in a bit. Now let's look at the median household income. So overall, if you look at the median household income, and that's the problem that I have with averages, the household income in GTA is about $101,000. This is the gross income before taxes. The top 10% earn about $126,000, and the top 5%, and these are again household, if there are two people, I'm actually including both the incomes here, earns about $170,000. Now let's look at the mortgage eligibility for all these people. Now, if you look at the max mortgage eligibility, and obviously it depends on when you're looking at this video, what the interest rates are, what your down payment is, what your credit is. I'm assuming that you don't have a lot of debt here. So if you look at these numbers, if you look at the top line here, 450 and 560, that basically means if you're doing a 10% down, earning a median household income, you would be able to buy only for $450,000. That's your maximum eligibility on the home price. And if you do a 20% down payment, it will be slightly higher, because again, you are doing a bigger down payment now, which is about $560,000. And honestly, it's very rare to get anything in that range unless you're open to buying a condo. Therefore, obviously, not everyone is actually buying a home, and that is very true, because 66,000 out of 2 million households only exchanged hands. That number is pretty low in context to the number of households that we have in GTA. If you look at the top 10%, obviously the eligibility increases $580,000 to $750,000, and this is where 200,000 households can actually afford the homes in GTA, and if need be, they can actually move to places like Calgary, because you can buy a much bigger home for even less than $580,000 in a place like Calgary, or they are moving slightly away into Kitchener, Waterloo, where I live, or going to Ottawa. So all these places, these people can actually look for, if they are not looking for to buy a condo townhouse or a townhouse, they want a bigger home. So the eligibility becomes a lot more real in this 10% range. And if you get to the top 5%, which is still 100,000 households, which is still more than the 66,000 homes that get sold, and more than 20,000, first-time home buyers that buy a home every single year, you would see that the eligibility is in range for buying at least a townhouse or a semi-detached. And right now in Kitchener, you can actually buy in this range a detached home with a finished basement. So it's a beautiful market to buy right now, especially if you are in the top 5 to 10% of income earners. Now, the reason why I've made this slide is just to highlight that not everyone is buying and not everyone is eligible, but there are still enough people in the top 5 to 10% of income range that can buy a certain house even in GTA, and if need be, they can actually move slightly away from GTA and be qualified for a decent start a home. Now, these numbers actually do not include the 9% entrepreneur households. So people who are realtors, mortgage agents, like own different businesses, have shops, all these people, because they show less personal income and have more retained earnings in their business, there is about 180,000 entrepreneur households that will lie in that, average. But they are probably high income earners that can actually afford to buy a lot more. So they are probably the top 5, top 1, top 2%, but their income, because this only takes into consideration the personal income, is a lot lower, and they actually are reducing the average a lot when it comes to median household income. Again, all this to say that there are enough people in the market who can afford these 20,000 homes that are being bought by first-time home buyers. And if they are not first-time home buyers, they'll have enough equity in their home, because long-term real estate always goes up, and they can actually use that equity to buy the remainder of the homes. First of all, if you're buying a primary home, buy for the right reasons. I keep saying that in every video, and I'll keep saying it till the time people start to buy for the right reasons. If you're buying a primary home, you're buying because of lack of stability in a rental home, especially if you need to be in a school district for your kids. That's the number one reason why you buy a home. You don't buy because you can't pay someone else's mortgage. That's a stupid reason to buy. The second reason why you buy a primary home is because you want to retire mortgage free and rent free, because your active income may not be enough to cover your expenses if you are living on rent. The third reason to buy is just the emotion of buying and making memories in that home, celebrating Christmas, celebrating Diwali, celebrating your kids' first walk. All these are strong emotional reasons to buy a home, and that's okay. And finally, if you are someone like me who is also investing into the stock market while they own their primary home, I do a little bit of, real estate investing as well. It actually just comes with portfolio diversification. So I'm invested into my personal home, which is gaining in equity, and I'm paying down the mortgage, and I will retire mortgage free. And if I want to retire in India, I can actually sell the home and I pay 0% capital gain tax and take all that money back to India and can retire a very rich life. You'll see that I've not mentioned making money off my primary home, because you cannot, especially in the short run. And number two, I'm not buying a home because I don't want to pay someone else's mortgage. That's just a false thing that a lot of social media people say. It's completely stupid. And I'm sorry if this offends anyone. The other thing that we need to take care of is that we cannot be house poor. If you're buying a home, we need to make sure that we are prepared to buy a home. The first question that we need to ask is, how much can I comfortably afford to pay per month? And you need to use a rule of 35. I'll put a calculator in the description. You can just download that. But the rule of 35 says that the mortgage payment plus the property tax plus the condo fee, if you have any, should be less than 35% of your net household income. And if you do that, you have enough money left for your needs, your childcare expenses, your shopping, your travel, and most importantly, your investing budget towards the stock market. The number two question that you need to ask is, have I budgeted for closing costs? And that's important too, because it's not just a down payment that you need to do. There are other expenses when you close a home, and you need to budget for another 1.5 to 2% of your purchase price. And I made a video on closing costs. I'll put that in the description as well. The third question that we need to ask is, are we ready in terms of job? Do we have job security? Are people getting fired in our company? And if that's the case, you should never look to be in the market. And you should always have 3+ months of emergency fund. This is over and above your closing cost and down payment. And only if you have that, you are ready to buy a home. Now, I am doing, like I said in the beginning of the video, I am doing a free first-time home buyer workshop on Wednesday. So do make sure that you are going to the description. There are limited slots available. This is a 90-minute class where the first 45 minutes will be spent on understanding the process and the mistakes that most people make. And the other 45 minutes will be Q&A. So you can ask me any question that you have and clear the doubt. The only reason why I'm doing this workshop is so that you feel more confident about your most important purchase. That's all I have for today. If you like the video, do not forget to hit the like button, because more people like you will now benefit from the video. And that's how the algorithm works. That's all I have for today. मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए bye bye.